Before we get into that crazy Game 7 we just had between Boston and Philadelphia, I want to shout out my little army of subscribers, all 20 of y'all. Appreciate y'all. Keep doing y'all thing. When it comes down to it, I'm gonna remember y'all for real. If I get to 500, 1,000, I will get somebody a jersey. Maybe I'll hook up my first 20 people with something too. I don't know. I'm still thinking, but the jersey stuff is real. I'm a very giving person. I say this before every video, and to be honest, I don't think I get any subscribers from these videos. I usually get subscribers from my short, but whatever. Neither here nor there. Let's start talking about what we just saw. We need to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Seeing them year in and year out just makes me so upset sometimes that I really don't even know where to begin. I'm going to get into all of them eventually, but I honestly don't even know where to start. But let's just start way back then. Let's talk about their draft history. Every team has misses in the draft. It's unfair to go back and talk about players that you shoulda, coulda, woulda drafted when certain players don't work out. That being said, Philadelphia is one of those teams where they consistently whiffed on picks by choosing the wrong players that are just one pick away. This isn't a situation where you're like picking top 3 and people say, oh, they should have drafted Draymond Green or Tyrese Halliburton that year. That's just not realistic. But for Philly, their track record is looking abysmal. So 2014 is the time where they did a good job. But that decision kind of got made for them. Embiid had some talk around being the first overall, but then he got hurt and he just winded up in Philly. Good for them. The following year, who did they draft? Jahlil Okafor. I know they wanted D'Angelo Russell that year and they thought the Lakers would go with Okafor, but you already had Embiid. You already had Nerlens Noel. I know they weren't surefire things, but why did you draft a center for the 3rd year in a row? That's why people used to call them the Philadelphia 70 centers. Then the next year, they took Ben Simmons first. That one is funny considering everything that went down. I remember at the time, there were people saying Ingram was more of a project and that he would be a better pick down the line, and those guys were laughed at for years, even though they ended up right. I mean, obviously Ben was going first. He had the more hype and stuff, but I still think Ben is a player that has some value, but the debate with Ingram is an interesting one to say the least now. I mean, we have to kind of look at that, but I'm gonna give them the pass for that one. Embiid being as good as he is allows me to look past the majority of that. But there was really 2 years that I just can't look past, and that is the 2017 NBA draft. This is a draft I remember very clearly. The circus around the draft is really funny looking back. Of course, we had Lonzo. I and many others thought he would be better than Fultz right out the gate. But Philly was so fixated on Fultz. The idea that they ended up trading up just to draft Fultz is hilarious when you consider the guy that they were trading out of getting is the guy that's smashing on them year after year after year. But to be fair to them, when the draft was in full swing, Tatum was actually projected to go like 4th or 5th. I believe Phoenix that year had 5th and people thought he would end up there. But the Fultz pick is catastrophic as it is. And even without accounting for having to give up an asset to have the chance to draft him, just picking him in general was not good. I'm not going to act like he had all these red flags, but one thing I remember very clearly is when everyone gets drafted, they have this first media event and all the rookies go there. And part of the draft process that I hate is the projection and accusing people of being dumb or things like that. But when they asked Fultz, they said, how many teams are in the NBA? I think he said 28. And to me, that says a lot about you as a person. Like, this is supposed to be your job. Like, you're supposed to know these things. And for you to think there's 28 teams in the NBA rather than 30, to me, ever since then, he kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I remember thinking, dang, I'm sure the Lakers and Celtics are glad they didn't end up with Fultz. But anyways, whatever. Moving on. So back in the day, there was this thing that was very, very highly coveted, and it was called the Lakers pick. It was a pick that was coveted by Philly fans for years. I'm trying not to make this a draft talk video, but when you talk about how Philly got here, this is all part of the equation. The Lakers pick was this mythical draft pick from the Lakers that they had traded away years prior to Phoenix, who ended up trading it to Philly. As the Lakers and Philly were in their own tank battles, this was something that Philly fans dangled over Lakers fans' heads for years, the fact that they owned their pick. The problem is the pick was protected for the Lakers to use if it fell into the top 3. The Lakers successfully kept their pick every year, while Philly fans were dreaming before the lottery of the idea of having 2 top 5 picks every year. It was, oh, we're going to have 2 top 5 picks. These are the 2 high prospects we're going to draft if the Lakers pick works out for us, and it never did. So when the pick was finally unprotected in 2018, it ended up being pick number 10. Not too bad, you may say. Who did Philly draft with this pick? A guy named Mikal Bridges. Great pick, right? Even though this guy didn't break out immediately, he was always great in his role and a perfect fit for Philly, which was his hometown team that his mother worked for. Did he ever play for them? Oh wait, no. What happened? They traded him for Zaire Smith in Miami's 2021 pick, which they ended up trading to the Clippers, who got traded to OKC, and that ended up being Trey Mann. So that sounds like a flub to me, because it was. This level of whiffing on the draft is enough to set back any team at least a little bit. So imagine how their situation would be if they were able to rectify even one of those situations. Anyways, like I said, let me move on. Doc Rivers. I don't know what it is about this guy. A lot of people seem to not be his biggest fan, and he kind of has wore out his welcome in a lot of league circles. Most guys that aren't former 2008 Celtics members don't really have anything good to say about him, and I've seen him throw players under the bus enough times to see that however he's trying to connect with his players, it may not be working as effectively as he thinks it is. The guy has the most blown leads in the playoffs in NBA history. I'm going to say that's not entirely his fault, but at some point you have to look in the mirror and be like, why isn't this working? Though after all this, I think Philly should honestly keep him. He may not be perfect, but firing him to be the scapegoat of the season, that would be kind of silly right now. Let's move on to James Edward Harden Jr. This guy has put up some absolute elimination game stinkers, some absolutely putrid, disgusting stat lines. When it's time to show up to keep yourself from going home, he has been doing this for years, stinking it up. That being said, this series, I almost want to give him a pass. He's clearly a different guy than he was at his peak, but he was able to essentially win Philly 2 games with how he played. He's also supposed to be the second guy here. I'm not going to sit here and act like Harden has done a good job in the postseason by any means, but I'm also not going to give him the lion's share of the blame. I personally think that where there's smoke, there's fire. So I actually anticipate that he will return to Houston in the offseason. And I feel like Houston wouldn't have hired Udoka if they weren't confident in that being the case. I don't know what Philly will do to replace him, but hopefully they can work something out with a sign and trade. Now let's talk about the big guy. Joel Embiid. Year in and year out, it's really the same story with this dude. The playoffs roll around and this guy picks up an injury, whether you want to attribute it to poor conditioning, lack of preparation, being frail, a bad medical staff, or just freak injuries. At the end of the day, there is something that happens every year with him, and usually is part of the reason why they have such a big downfall. Whether it's an injury to the face, the knee, the back, whatever injury, expect Joel Embiid to be banged up once it's postseason time. His stats consistently go down in the playoffs. He consistently misses games. He consistently puts up games where he will go significant stretches of not being able to score, and it just looks absolutely embarrassing. I know there's a clip of him flailing and flopping like a fish, and his defenders have said, oh, he just does this to protect his body, which I'm kind of like, sure, okay. But what's the point of him doing that if it doesn't work? I saw some putrid stats about Joel's playoff numbers that I'm going to look up and speak on right now. Joel's numbers dropped significantly in the playoffs, the biggest being his points per game, going from 33.1 this year to 23.7 in the postseason. His true shooting percentage went from 66% to 56%. Embiid is 0 for 3 in Game 7s in his career. He had more turnovers than assists, has never made a conference final, has shot under 45% as a center in 5 of his 11 playoff series, has shot above 50% as a center in only 3 of them. His team was undefeated without him in the playoffs and 11-5 without him in the regular season. He got locked up by a 40-year-old Al Horford, scoring 38% when he was guarded by him. He has never beat a top 4 seed in his career in the playoffs. And worst of all, he let Tobias Harris outscore him in Game 7. I saw his post-game interview about how the team needs to be better, but I'm not even going to really hold that against him. But for Embiid to be a guy who loves talking trash on the internet, getting into beefs with other players, even beefing with guys on his own team when he's supposed to be the leader, even if they are guys that are malcontent, you have to be better if that is how you act. I know Ben Simmons has a very negative reputation, but part of the reason why he was so against playing in Philly again was because him and Joel never got along, and then the same guy throws him under the bus. The fact that in the last year of them playing together, they were talking about, yeah, we're going to live together to get really close to one another. To me, that shows me they always had an issue with one another. To be honest, the other top guys, they wouldn't throw their teammate under the bus like that, and that's why I'm going to have to hold Joel accountable. As for what this team should focus on in the offseason, I think if Harden goes, you need to do your best to complete a sign and trade. You have to bank on Maxey getting better. Try and flip Tobias Harris's contract and some draft capital. Maybe you can flip that into a couple pieces. Really focus on Joel taking it easy in the regular season now that he has his MVP. Try to find a way to bring in some 3-and-D guys, which won't be easy as the market is not great for that this offseason. You will also have DeAnthony Melton and PJ Tucker to use as trade filler, even though PJ may be a little more difficult to trade because he has that $11 million player option. Try to bring in a point guard if you lose Harden and hope Maxey takes the next step. That's really all you can do. A lot of this is going to fall on Joel's shoulders, so we will see how he responds. I didn't even get to talk about the Celtics, so I guess I'm going to have to make a separate video for them. I basically just ended up ranting about the Sixers. But anyways, you know, the Sixers, I don't think they're done yet. I don't think this is the end of them. I guess you can call it a run, them just getting blasted in the second round every year. But, you know, with a few tweaks and they really have to look inward and see what's fundamentally wrong with their team, I think they can rebound from this. I would give this core group another year before maybe thinking about making some big trades, but as it stands now, they may not have a choice if Harden leaves. So we'll see. I'm not completely down on Philly. It's just seeing them embarrass themselves year after year, it just gets to be too much. Hopefully for their fans' sake, they can figure it all out. Anyways, you know the deal. Subscribe. Let's get some jerseys going. I'm gonna just keep asking. I'm gonna keep asking until y'all do it. I mean, I'm sitting here making videos. I told y'all it's hard for me to make videos. You know, it's difficult, and I'm still out here doing it. You could do it too. Y'all make some videos too. I'll watch y'all videos. All right. Peace out, y'all.